My name is Commander Avery Shaw. I'm standing behind the doors of the chapel, white gloves tight at my sides, heels quiet on polished wood. The uniform I'm wearing isn't just a dress code. It's memory, service, and sacrifice stitched into fabric. 22 years, 4 stars on my shoulder, more ribbons on my chest than my father ever acknowledged. I've led sailors into combat, buried friends, and written orders that saved lives and ended others. And today, I wear the same uniform to marry the man who saw all of me and never once asked me to be less. Then my phone buzzes. I look down and see a message from a number I haven't saved since I stopped trying to impress it. Wearing that uniform to your wedding? Disgraceful. No greeting, no congratulations, just that. I don't flinch. The message doesn't sting. It confirms what I've always known. My father never saw me. Not in boots, not in bars, not even now, when I stand as a full admiral. But I see myself. And when those doors open, the men and women I've led, fought beside, bled for they see me too. So I square my shoulders, tuck the phone away, and take one last breath as Avery Shaw. Then I step forward, as everything I've earned. I grew up in a house where silence wore medals. My father, Colonel William Shaw, believed in discipline, precision, and order. Emotions were a distraction, something to be filed away like old field reports. He ran our home like a barracks. Meals were at 1800 sharp. Shoes lined up at exactly 45 degrees. Every Sunday night, silence reigned during 60 minutes, and you didn't dare speak unless you were spoken to. He wasn't cruel, just rigid. Affection didn't exist in the way most people know it. I can't remember a single time he said, "I love you." He told me soldiers don't whine. When I scraped my knee, he handed me an antiseptic and turned away. That was his version of comfort. My mother was the soft edge in a house of hard lines. She taught high school English and read me poetry at bedtime. Her voice gentle, her touch light. She called me Little Stormbird, said I had too much wind in my wings to stay grounded. She was the reason I didn't run the moment I turned 18. Her presence was a quiet shield against the cold, but she never challenged him, just tried to translate his silence into something bearable. Once, at 10, I told my dad I wanted to be in the Navy. He didn't even look up from his plate. "Leave the uniform to men who can handle it," he said. I didn't cry. I never did. I just remembered. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why love in our house always sounded like disapproval. I memorized every military regulation I could find. Not to prove him wrong, just to belong. That was the beginning of the long silence between us. Not loud, not violent, just always there, filling the space where connection should have been. When I got my acceptance letter to the Naval Academy, my hands were shaking. I handed it to my father as if it were a peace offering. He stared at it for a full 30 seconds before saying, "So you're serious about this nonsense?" He didn't speak to me for 2 months. No breakfast together, no good luck before I left. Just silence, heavy and final, like a door closing. At Annapolis, I learned early that being a woman in uniform meant living under a microscope. I wasn't just proving myself. I was proving women like me belonged. I woke up earlier, studied longer, ran farther. Every failure felt like confirmation of his words. So I didn't allow myself to fail. My first year was brutal. Drill instructors tore us down to the bone, but I never let them see me break. At night, I wrote letters to my dad. Short updates, just trying to keep the door open. He never replied. I rose through the ranks faster than most. Not because I was brilliant, but because I didn't know how to stop. Every bar on my shoulder was a conversation he never had with me. When I pinned on lieutenant, I mailed him a photo. Nothing came back, not even a returned envelope. Still, I kept sending the milestones. The promotion to lieutenant commander, my first command unit, the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. I told myself I didn't care if he responded, that the silence no longer mattered. But it always did. At every ceremony, I looked for him in the crowd. At every graduation, every deployment, I searched for a familiar face that never came. But I kept going, because part of me still believed the uniform would speak louder than the silence, that if I earned enough respect, he might finally see me. I became what he said I couldn't: an officer, a leader, a force. Not in defiance, in proof. Proof that I was more than the doubt he fed me. And with every step forward, I learned something else. That resilience isn't about revenge. It's about becoming the person no one believed you could be. It happened off the coast of Somalia. A supply team was ambushed during recon. 2 injured. 1 is bleeding out. I was a lieutenant commander. I didn't have to be there. But I went anyway. We were pinned down behind rusted shipping containers, bullets ripping through the air like paper. One of our guys, Torres, had taken a shot to the leg. I dragged him 40 yards under fire, cinched a tourniquet with one hand, and radioed medevac with the other. By the time the chopper landed, my side was shredded from shrapnel. I refused the stretcher. Said I'd walk. They called me Iceback after that. Said I bled ice, not blood. I wasn't proud of the name. I was proud. Torres lived. He sends me a Christmas card every year. His daughter's name is Avery. After that mission, the tone changed. Men who barely looked at me before followed my orders without a blink. Respect wasn't spoken. It was earned. The brass took notice, too. Commendations. Commendation after commendation. But none of it reached the person I kept hoping to hear from. I sent my father the report, attached a photo of the medal. Silence. That silence hit harder than any bullet ever could. Not because I needed his praise, but because every part of me still hoped. I had just saved a life under fire. And still, all I felt coming home was the weight of being invisible. The morning of my wedding felt like a mission. Clear skies, uniform crisp, buttons polished, 4 stars on my shoulder. I wasn't wearing lace. I was wearing history. James didn't flinch when I told him I'd walk down the aisle in full dress whites. He just said, "That's who you are. Why would I want anything else?" We chose the Naval Chapel. No flowers, no bridesmaids. Just respect. A quiet ceremony surrounded by the people who had seen me through more than vows could ever describe. The night before, I sent a card to my father. Short, direct. "I'm getting married at 1,300 hours. You're welcome to come. I'll be in uniform." 15 minutes before the doors opened, I stood in the foyer with 2 of my oldest SEALs at my side. They weren't supposed to be there, but they came anyway. "You walked us through hell," one said. "Let us walk you into something better." Oh, the chapel was packed. Every seat is filled. Rows of uniforms, some with medals I'd pinned myself. When the doors opened, I stepped forward, boots clicking against polished wood. And then it happened. "Admiral on deck." The voice rang out, sharp and certain. 200 decorated warriors stood, saluted. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. I didn't cry. Not then. I felt it in my spine. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a salute to every sacrifice I'd ever made. I saw James at the altar, hands behind his back, standing at ease like he knew I preferred. He smiled. And in that moment, I felt seen. Fully. Completely. But then my phone buzzed in my pocket. One message. One sentence. "Wearing that uniform to your wedding? Disgraceful." No name. But I knew who it was. My father. The air stayed still. But something inside me shifted. Not pain. Not even disappointment. Just clarity. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Then lifted my chin. Some people show love in silence. Some in attendance. He chose neither. But everyone else in that room? They chose me. As the chapel doors swung open, the light hit my shoulders like a spotlight. On either side of me stood Chief Miller and Torres, both retired, both carrying stories in their eyes. They weren't just walking me down the aisle. They were walking with me through everything I had carried alone. My steps were steady, my breath controlled, but my heart caught the moment I saw them all rise. Row after row, 200 seals street-ooed in silence. No orders, no announcement. Just the instinctive unity of warriors honoring one of their own. Their posture was sharp, but it wasn't about regulation. It was respect, a kind of reverence that can't be demanded. It has to be earned. I had led some of them through the darkest hours of their lives, and now they were giving me something I never asked for but always hoped to receive. I didn't look at my ribbons. I didn't think about my rank. I looked at their faces, their eyes, the way they stood so still, as if the moment itself deserved more than applause. It deserved silence. James was at the altar, steady and calm, like he always was. I saw him, but it was the wall of men behind him that broke me open. That was when I realized they weren't saluting my title, they were saluting my life. Not because I outranked them, but because I never made them feel small. And in that instant, I didn't feel powerful. I felt seen, really seen. And that, more than any medal or mission, was everything I had fought for. The day after the wedding, I was sitting on the back porch with a cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. It was a photo from my cousin Rachel. No words, just the image. He was there, my father, standing in the parking lot across from the chapel, hands in his pockets, back straight like he was still in uniform. He didn't come inside, didn't speak to anyone, just watched. I stared at the photo for a long time, not sure what I felt first. Maybe it was a shock. Maybe it was that old flicker of hope I thought I'd buried years ago. He showed up. Not for me. Not really. But something in him must have needed to see. I wondered if he heard the salute, if he saw the moment. But he didn't walk in. He didn't cross the threshold. And that told me everything. Some people stay outside because they don't know how to come in. And some choose not to. I couldn't tell which one he was. But I stopped needing to know. I saved the photo. Not as proof, just as closure. Sometimes, silence breaks not with words, but with a picture of a man standing alone. And finally, I stopped waiting for more. The letter came 6 weeks after my speech at the Navy Leadership Conference. It was hand-addressed, the handwriting unmistakable. My mother used to say his penmanship looked like it marched in formation. I opened it slowly, half expecting disappointment to spill out. But the first line stopped me cold. Avery, I was wrong. He went on to say he had watched the speech online, that it wasn't the ribbons or the rank that struck him. It was the way I spoke. Clear, commanding, human. He called me a leader, said the kind of leader he wished he had served under. And then, almost as if it hurt to admit it, he wrote, "You did what I never could. You led without fear." I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, letter in my lap, letting the words sink in. They didn't erase anything, but they mattered. I folded the paper and placed it back in the envelope. Then I left it on the table, a mark of something shifting. Finally, not a reunion, not a fix, but maybe, just maybe, a beginning. It was exactly 1 year after the wedding. The sun was sharp over D.C., and the Navy Yard was packed with uniforms and quiet reverence. I stood on the stage, the Distinguished Service Cross pinned to my chest, the applause fading as the Admiral stepped back. I looked out over the crowd, past the officers and friends, and saw him, my father, standing near the back, dressed in his old Army blues, sleeves pressed, shoes polished, posture perfect. We locked eyes for a second. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. But when the room rose for the final salute, he lifted his hand to his brow and held it. It wasn't a gesture of apology. It wasn't love. It was something else. Respect. Earned. Not given. I nodded once. Just enough. I didn't need words. That salute said enough. Not redemption, but recognition. And that was more than I ever expected. more than I thought I needed. I stepped down from the stage with my head high. The metal on my chest didn't feel heavier than the years behind me. And for the first time in a long time, nothing felt unfinished. Some salutes stay with you forever, not the ones that come from rank or ceremony, but the ones that say, I see you, the ones that come after a long silence or in the middle of your hardest fight. I've carried medals, worn ribbons, and stood on stages. But that moment when people who knew my journey stood up for me will always be the one that matters most. And maybe it's the one I earned the hardest. If you've ever had to stand tall when someone tried to shrink you, I want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments, because every story like that, it's another kind of salute.